And we have started. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the BAMF podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty, and today we're talking about the Flash Gordon Kickstarter for Savage Worlds. Gordon's alive! Yes, that was my worst Brian Blessed impersonation. And
how many hours do we have to save the universe?
Oh, man.
14, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
Is it right? Is that right?
I believe so.
And the charming voice you don't recognize is belonging to Mr. Scott Woodard, who has a great resume in the RPG and writing games. He did Sixth Gun for Savage Worlds. Looks like you also did some writing for Doctor Who RPG.
Not for the RPG. That was writing for Big Finish Productions. I've written 4 audio scripts for them, 3 Doctor Who's and Dark Shadows. So wow. That was kind of an exciting little period of my life.
Oh, wow. I love audio drama. I wrote a couple of short ones many years ago for a game that everyone's forgotten about now. But wow, that's really cool. So War of the Elementals, that was another radio play you did?
That was one that I did for a company called Colonial Radio Theater, and it's based on a Ray Harryhausen idea that I guess it was going to be a film back in the 60s, but they wound up turning it into a comic series, and then I adapted it to audio.
Wow, dude, that's... I almost want to talk with you for a whole hour just about that, but let's press on and focus on Flash Gordon. Also wrote Cinema and Sorcery, which is a cool book Green Ronin put out a few years ago.
Oh, just this year, actually. It's brand new.
Yep. And currently he is the godfather of Flash Gordon for Pinnacle Entertainment. Anything else we should mention?
No, that just about covers all the fun stuff.
Okay, cool. Really glad to have you. Thanks for showing up. And joining me as co-host is Jason Townder, aka Dr. Comics. How you doing, Jason?
I'm good. It's a good day.
All right, cool. So we had a bunch of questions about the Flash Gordon RPG. I guess the first thing that we were talking about pre-show, before we forget it, you guys are doing what I guess is becoming, I'm seeing more and more of these, but once upon a time, this was almost heresy. You're doing a 15-day Kickstarter, and you have 5 days left.
Yeah.
And you're like 400% funded, over 400% funded.
Yeah, easily. I think last time I checked, we're just shy of 77,000, and our original goal was 15, which we met in the first hour. So far, so good.
Yeah, well, and congrats. You guys are kicking its ass. That's good to see. Now, I remember the promo for this a long time, like 2 years and a half, 2 years ago came out.
Yeah, at Gen Con.
Oh, God, that was so awesome. It was just this little teaser, but it leans so heavily into the kind of the aesthetic of that movie from the early 80s with Max von Sydow. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was something that we definitely wanted to do. And if I remember correctly, Shane sort of did a pitch about stuff that was coming up, and that was including Fear Agent and Lagoon. And then he said, let's get the lights. And then he played the Flash video. And, of course, the fun thing, if you weren't there, the lights then came up, and we were all wearing Flash Gordon T-shirts that we had magically transformed into in the darkness. So that was a lot of fun.
Now, Scott, can I ask you about the licensing and the rights stuff? So do you have access to the film, or is that all that you have? Like, what part of Flash Gordon do you have access to?
Well, let's put it this way. So if you're a fan of the film, and of course a lot of Flash Gordon fans are,
yeah.
And although I have crossed paths with a few who are not a fan of the film, but to be fair, if you've ever seen the movie, one thing that and you're familiar with the original IP, so to speak, you'll notice that a lot of the stuff that showed up in that film was adapted pretty faithfully from the original comic strips by Alex Raymond.
Right.
There are some scenes that are more or less lifted straight out, even bits of dialogue that are lifted right out of the comic strips.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, we have access to pretty much everything. And so there are homages and nods, and of course there's plenty of faithful stuff lifted right out of the strips. But if you're reading through the rule book, if you're reading through our Kingdoms of Mongo source book, a sly fan will note there are plenty of little nods and subtle hints and things that connect it right to the film as well. So pretty much it's everything.
So,
go ahead.
But what you negotiated for was the comic strip.
Yes. I mean,
because the film copies the comic strip so much, the overlap on the Venn diagram allows you to get all that.
Yeah, and one thing that I set out to do from the very, very beginning was not just to write, a Flash Gordon role-playing game, but I really wanted to write something that would also appeal to the most hardcore Flash Gordon fan out there.
Yeah,
I wanted the guy who, is familiar with the strips, or even maybe the 1970s novels written by Ron Goulart, or the Filmation series. I wanted those people to actually read the book and say, everything is here. How did he do that?
Well, that's cool. So you're very aware of like your very big fan base and kind of trying to appeal to all of its different sectors.
Yeah, and every time we started working on whether it was a piece of art or the minis or the maps that we've come up with, I mean, we have a new updated map of Mongo that is based on Arlene Williamson's original map that came out. I believe the original one showed up in the late 50s or 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Most people are familiar with that map of Mongo, and what we did is we updated that. We started with that map, and now all of the kingdoms that are represented in the strips, certainly up through sort of the beginning of the dailies, are now on that map, including just little hints at things that maybe one word came up in one of the strips where somebody says, hey, there was, I know, a lost kingdom of such and such. It's on the map now. It's there. So that kind of stuff, when we worked on it, it just got me excited because I knew that the Flash Gordon fans were just going to eat that stuff up.
A lot of that material is so imaginative, you know. It was kind of Jack Kirby-like in a sense that you would just have one crazy idea after another, and they don't even all get developed. They just kind of all get thrown out there.
Yes.
And which is meat and drink to GMs, because one of the big challenges with an IP is treading all over the same stories that the main heroes have already done. But when an IP has all these little corners and little bits that have been mentioned but never explored, that all allows the players to interact with that space in a new and creative way while still being true to the IP.
Exactly.
Hey, what was it like meeting Sam Jones?
Sam is awesome. I had a really good time when I met up with him. It was sort of a cold meeting, and he really didn't know what I was going to pitch. And when I mentioned what we were doing, while he is not a Dungeons and Dragons fan, he was aware of it, which was the really cool thing. I mean, he at least understood that, you know, he knows something about role-playing games. And when I explained it to him, he was totally on board, and it was great. I mean, we were that was one of the most exciting things for us in the process was actually getting Sam involved. It's, as some people have said, talk about a perfect fit. And if you think about it, like Deadlands, you know, Shane got Bruce Campbell to write the intro for the Deadlands book, and that was a perfect fit as well because, of course, he was doing Briscoe County Jr. at the time. So
is that how did you get? How is Jones involved? Like, what's he doing?
He's writing the forward.
The forward for our core rule book. Yeah. Right. So it should be a lot of fun. I mean, we haven't seen what he's concocted yet. He's still dabbling with that. So we're really excited to read it when it finally comes across our desk.
Just having him involved is a huge kind of blessing to all the fans and everything.
Oh yeah, and he's really. I mean, when we were getting questions from him via email, it was kind of amazing because he was asking, "So what do bennies do?" And what, you know, like all these really specific Savage Worlds questions, and that was amazing to me because it wasn't just I don't know what this game is. I'm going to write you something about when I was an actor. He really wanted to understand how this all works, and
he's bought in. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So is he pretty much exactly as he seems in the movie with Seth with the talking teddy bear and Seth MacFarlane?
No Ted references. No.
All right. I was just checking. So two things.
I'm sorry. I'll go back. No, he's just super, super nice. He doesn't party like it's 1980 though, or maybe he does. But when my experience with him, he doesn't.
None of us can anymore, Scott. It's hard. It's really hard. I can't find Jolt Cola or Purple Passion anywhere anymore.
Oh, don't get me started on Jolt. I grew up in Jolt's hometown, basically.
Really?
We drank so much Jolt that I had one of my players, Dan Brophy, his superhero character was named Jolt.
I think I had a Jolt character as well. Yeah, because I'm originally from Rochester, New York, and that's where
it happening. Crisis of Infinite Jolts.
Yes, exactly. They all come crashing together. Jolt is actually, I mean, total sidetrack here, but you can actually find Jolt in certain dollar stores right now.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Can we pause this podcast?
Yeah, it's back. It's back in stores, and they have some kind of a weird exclusive deal with I don't know if it's Dollar General or one of those. And
yeah, that's great.
I just need high tops and big hair and hypercolor shirts to come back, and I will be a happy man. All right. That is good news.
Yeah.
All right. Back on focus. Two questions. First one more game related. We're talking about Flash Gordon, the RPG. And the goal of an RPG is you invite all your friends over, or you dial them up on Skype or whatever, and you have adventures. But like the Atomic Robo RPG or like Doctor Who RPG, you get one character. I mean, hey, who's playing Flash Gordon and who gets to be Dr. Zarkov? How do you make the game fun for people who are not Flash Gordon?
Well, I mean, the thing is that we are offering a variety of things for character creation that will give people a whole bunch of stuff to pick from. So we've got 9 unique races that you can play. Flash is out there. I mean, this isn't a world where, I mean, at least according to our continuity, Flash and Dale and Zarkov are out there doing their thing, and you can actually get contacted by Flash. I mean, we've written that into some of the Savage Tales where Flash actually, radios to the heroes to tell them there's a mission they need to do. You're all working for the Freeman, which is sort of a global rebellion fighting against Ming the Merciless. So go ahead.
I was going to make a bad Dune joke about Freeman, but just go ahead.
So that's the organization you're a part of. So as I say, 9 different races. So you certainly want to go and explore those as a player, and new edges and hindrances and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you can be an Earthman if you want to. You could be, let's be fair. We're also providing the stats for all those original characters. So if somebody wants to say, "Hey, I want to play Flash Gordon," it's there. It's available for you.
But it sounds like you're sort of taking that idea of turning them into quest-giving NPCs.
Yeah, absolutely, and it works. It works beautifully.
Yeah, I think it would. I think a lot of our players will recognize that too. Like they understand. Okay, like this is the guy that I go to get adventures from, and that's a nice way, I think, of balancing out the classic problem with IP. Why am I in the War of the Ring when I'm not Aragorn? Or Frodo?
Right. Yeah. And thank goodness for at least the continuity in regards to the Freeman and the comic strips, because they're introduced and then keep coming back, and there are always references to these underground. This underground rebellion. There's the power men who work in Mingo City. There are these thieves that live in the sewers under Mingo. There are people in different kingdoms but they all always seem to come back to this idea of them being part of this network of rebels. So it was almost gifted to us for a role-playing game.
When did these strips come out again, Scott? Because I forgot.
I saw your dog sleeping.
Yes, they're playing. I got 2.
I actually got startled there for a moment.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. The original premiered in 1934. The very first strip was in 1934.
So do you suspect that any of these Freeman references are kind of references to the French Resistance?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the original strips that is certainly analogous to events that were going on in the world. And unfortunately, I do have to say this. Unfortunately, if you do revisit the strips, sometimes there are some things in there that are not really PC anymore, and sort of racially motivated. And
the depiction of Asian culture, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that stuff is in there, and there's some pretty derogatory stuff in there. But we're able to get past that. We're able to move on.
Ming is kind of one of the quintessential Yellow Perils. I mean, he's right up there with Fu Manchu.
Oh, absolutely. Although he transforms a little bit as time goes on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you see him in the really early strips, he is very much Asian, right down to the long beard, but then it's sort of as he matures, he seems to become more just sort of a sinister figure and less Asian towards his end. And spoiler alert! In the strips, he actually gets defeated, although he does come back. But that's for another time.
Did you get access to any of the original art?
I'm not sure how that worked out. That's almost a question for Shane and like Aaron Acevedo, because I believe most of the stuff that we were scanning from was coming directly from Titan Books, who did the large hardcover collections recently. And so at the very least, we were getting some pretty good high-res scans.
Okay, so I'm going to bet you guys are not covering, we're not going to see any stills from the movie.
No, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's a bummer, but that's given the nature of rights and, how much it costs to license, et cetera.
But we do have lots of original Alex Raymond art in the books, and we also have a lot of new art by Aaron Riley. So if you guys are familiar with any of his work, his stuff shows up all over the place. He's a phenomenal artist.
But you've
done our covers. And
you've got a bunch of Raymond art in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the books are packed with Alex Raymond artwork, so we're really happy with that.
So Aaron Riley, what might I have seen him in?
Have you? Let's see. I'm just trying to think. Oh yeah, the Tal'Darai campaign setting book that Green Ronin did for Critical Role.
Oh yes.
Cover.
Oh, okay,
that's
cool.
Aaron's work. Okay. So.
All right, good. That's good to know. Hey, backing up a little bit, we touched on this briefly before the call, but I kind of want to delve into a little bit. I know you're a guy who wrote a book, called Cinema and Sorcery. So you're a cinephile. What do you think is the the specific appeal of retro sci-fi, or pulp sci-fi? Because it's it kind of it doesn't quite go. I mean, there was the John Carter of Mars movie, a couple years ago, and obviously Flash Gordon is still popular. And just this sort of aesthetic, what do you see as the enduring appeal there? Keeps people coming back to it.
I think that one of the things I think definitely works for it is that it does not take science literally. Like there's a lack of science. It's if you think about it, like Star Wars. George Lucas created Star Wars after he tried to do Flash Gordon. He wanted to do Flash Gordon and couldn't get access to it because it was already owned by someone else. And in Star Wars, and it's if you distill it down, it's very pulpy and very Flash Gordon-esque in the sense that rockets in space are making sound effects and lasers are flying everywhere, and so all those elements are there, and I think they're familiar to people.
And to many people, Scott, this is like what ruined science fiction in film.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But to you think that's a selling point. You think that's what's strong about it.
I do. I mean, I think because it's not science fiction; it's more space fantasy.
Yeah,
I think that's a nice little stepping off point for a lot of people, that they're comfortable with that. With the it blends so many genres. It blends science fiction. It blends a little bit of the Western because you've got sort of these gunslinging guys with their ray guns at their belts, and you've got damsels in distress who very much falls into the fantasy mold as well.
A lot of swashbuckling kind of swords and stuff all over it.
Yeah, I mean Baron alone, Prince Baron, he's a swashbuckler. He's in his model is Robin Hood.
Yes.
If you look at the design in the strips. All of his men, oh gosh, why am I spacing on the organization? There is an actual group, but anyway, they all look like Robin Hood.
That's an example that you were talking about where the film really copies the comic very closely. I mean, they got Timothy Dalton to basically play Robin Hood in that movie.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even the little mustache and everything.
That's right, yeah. But anyway, so you go on. You were talking about it's got a lot of different genres kind of all going together.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's one of the things that people find appealing is that if you're not big on the sci-fi element, then you'll like just the big monster element, and the strange alien world and landscape element, or the rockets spitting sparks out their back. I mean,
yeah. So
why do you think Savage Worlds is really a good fit for that kind of feel?
Totally, yeah.
So what? I mean, Savage Worlds has always kind of pitched itself as a pulp specialist kind of game. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is in what way is that actually true? Like, I know we've always seen it that way in sort of its marketing materials, and I've got copies of it sitting on the desk, so I know it. But what about the game actually makes it a good fit for something like Flash Gordon?
Well, I think I think Shane hit the nail on the head when he first used the phrase "fast, furious, fun" when he was originally pitching Savage Worlds, and of course he uses that. It's still a phrase that's out there. I jokingly on my original manuscript said "flash, furious, fun."
Yes, exactly.
Which is still something that I keep throwing out there every once in a while. I think one of the things that Savage Worlds does so extremely well, provided your players actually embrace this, is that it gives you a lot of flexibility during your action rounds. So if somebody says, listen, this is what I want to do in my round. I want to jump off that railing, grab the chandelier, swing down and land on the table, kick the chair over to this guy, and slice at the other guy with my rapier.
Yeah.
You can do it. It's pretty easy to just kind of throw together your actions. I mean, you've got some multiple actions in there. You might take a few penalties, but at the end of the day, you're going to be rolling dice and you are going to do exactly what your character just asked. But oftentimes what I see in a lot of other RPGs, certainly D&D, regardless of the edition, is usually it's, okay, I hit the orc with my sword.
Yeah.
And
well, if you wanted to duplicate the action that you just described, you'd have to figure, okay, well, I'm going to use my minor action to, to do this thing. And my movement is this, and I only have 30 feet of movement, and so I can't, and then I can't make my attack because I need my standard action to do this other thing.
Right. Yeah. So there'll be a lot of numbers crunching in that regard. And then also, the thing about Savage Worlds is we have things like bennies, So if somebody comes up with this brilliant idea and they screw it up and they roll, do a terrible roll, well, spend a benny, see if you can do it again. Oh, it didn't work. Spend another benny. And suddenly the whole table is cheering on this guy to try to make that action successful. And that's exactly what I think something like Flash Gordon is. That's what you do when you read the original strips or when you watch the movie. You're cheering these characters on.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
When I use Savage Worlds, what I'm really struck by is how much it's a tactical kind of 1 inch is 6 feet kind of game. And I often throw all those rules out when I play it. And I'm curious how like when you were playtesting Flash Gordon and stuff, like did you find yourself sort of using the map and miniatures rules kind of stuff, or do you feel like it runs better with Theater of the Mind?
Well, the funny thing is that almost all the people that I know, sort of internally with Savage Worlds and externally, just people running games at cons or out of their homes, almost everybody plays things slightly differently. I tend to mix up the use of my minis. Obviously, I will bring them out, in certain sequences if there's a combat or something like that and we need them. But for the most part, I sort of go Theater of the Mind with most of my stuff anyway. I think something like, say, Riffs, which is really driven by, firing giant guns and knowing how far away things are. I think minis come into play a lot more with that. But I think something like Flash Gordon, if you really embrace sort of the fantasy aspect of it, I think you could get away with doing entirely Theater of the Mind without any problem whatsoever.
You don't need those flamethrower templates and stuff very often like you would in Riffs.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're saying you're firing your ray gun pistol at the the Gakko, we can work that out. Gakkos are cave dwelling sort of dinosaurs with crab claw hands.
Yeah, I was in a punk band in college that was named that had that name. We did Red Hot Chili Pepper songs in the style of Johnny Cash. We were huge in Bloomington. It was drank a lot of Jolt Cola back then.
Oh, we're back to the Jolt.
It's a callback, the highest form of comedy. Hey, speaking of cool shit, I am looking at your Kickstarter page, and the Pinnacle always has a lot of cool swag. Not to blow smoke, but obviously cool minis, and you guys are selling a damn rocket ship on here.
Yeah, that just happened this week. Which one? Are you talking about the cliffhanger, or are you talking about the actual 3D model?
I was talking about the Air Scout rocket ship. What is this other thing you're talking about?
Yeah, well, we have a new rule in the game called the cliffhanger, and as part of one of the, I guess it's a few different pledge levels, we have a polished brass cliffhanger token that looks like a rocket ship. So we can talk a little bit about that too. But the rocket, the actual model, that just sort of came up. I guess Shane was in talks with these guys for a little while, and they sent us the pictures, and we loved what they did. And what's really nice about that is you can get it as an add-on. It's not necessarily, you don't have to, this is not part of your stretch goal purchases or anything. As far as I know, you can get it as an add-on. It ships flat, totally customizable. You can paint it. You can use the stickers that come with it. But I think it'll be a really nice addition, certainly for people who are using minis, or just to throw it out in the middle of your table and just, look how cool this is. It's like, yes, we have a rocket.
So, yeah, $50 is a reasonable price too, and that you put that on your table next to the Cheetos and the Mountain Dew, that really kind of sets the tone of what you're doing that night.
Oh yeah, there's no question. I mean, anytime I run it at cons, I'm going to be sure to pull that guy out.
So can we talk about your cliffhanger rule? Because the last game I remember with the cliffhanger rule was Adventure. I don't know how much you know, if you remember that old game.
Yeah, I do remember. There was a White Wolf, wasn't it?
Yeah. Some of my friends helped write on it, and I have a lot of fond affection for it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, I mean, it seemed obviously a natural fit for Flash Gordon to offer some kind of a cliffhanger rule. We had one in the original manuscript, and it just didn't seem to go as far as we wanted it to go. So over the last few months, we've been kicking around some new ideas, and we came up with this guy. So you'll have a token. Basically, what will happen is if you get to a point where things are looking mighty grim for a character or all the characters, whatever, you can choose to flip the token and go into come up with a cliffhanger. And so we have a couple of ways that can be done. We can have the GM can come up with something, the players can choose something, that you can collaborate on a cliffhanger, or we're also going to offer some cards, and you can actually have a selection of cards to pick from to help sort of inspire what your cliffhanger will be. So, and one of the nice stretch goals that I think it's been unlocked, is we're actually going to do printed version of those cards. And one of the other neat things about the cards, which I really like, is that there are rewards for using the cards. So in the upper corner of each card, you'll be able to get either bennies or sort of a Benny recharge when you do this, or our conviction token, which is another thing that we've been working on as well. So yeah, there's a couple of new Flash Gordon-y pulpy rules that we're throwing.
What I like about that,
yeah, that was unlocked at 65K, so about 10 grand ago. So yeah,
what I like about that is that if I understand right, if the player chooses to go into a cliffhanger.
Yes. Yeah.
See, that's a big flip, because
absolutely.
Ordinarily, the cliffhanger is what the GM does to the players. Like, he orchestrates it at the end of the session. Like, we're all going to be breaking until next week, and so I'm going to leave your car hurtling over the cliff, and I'll see you in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which is fun when you know it's coming, and the players can kind of, like, they see it, or it helps keep them interested. But
I would suspect that if most GMs who are going to be running Flash Gordon in the spirit of, say, the original serials are going to do that anyway.
Yeah, but this way you're actually giving the player some control over the story, which, I mean, a lot of games do. But am I misremembering? I don't remember a lot of that before in Savage Worlds. That feels new to Savage Worlds.
Yeah, it's. I mean, certainly the way we're handling it here is very much new to sort of add a little narrativist aspect to a Savage Worlds game.
I mean, do you worry about alienating any of the players who are like, I don't want any narrativist in my minis game?
You know what? If they don't want to use the cliffhanger token, no one's putting a laser gun at their head. They are welcome to leave that out and still play and enjoy themselves just as much.
Right on.
But I mean, a lot of the stuff in most any role-playing game, a lot of these kind of rules are modular. You can take and dump whatever you want. So, but we hope people try it. We hope people give it a shot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said for. I mean, I love kind of the whole spectrum. Like narrativist games and simulationist games and kind of everything. I mean, I play everything from Fate to Ars Magica. And you kind of can't get two games kind of more unlike. But so I think that's cool, like giving all these tools and kind of letting the table figure out what combination they want to play.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like I don't know if you run Savage Worlds, but a lot of people like to use the adventure deck. I use the adventure deck, although I don't use it for all my games. Like if they're more realistic games or grittier games, I usually don't use the adventure deck. But certainly, as we were talking about earlier, the pulpier games. Absolutely. I love the craziness that those things do. And if you think about it, the adventure deck really also adds a narrativist aspect to a certain degree as well, because the player is the one deciding whether or not they want to use that card.
Yeah, that's true. I had forgotten that, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. I like to use Savage Worlds for stuff like 1889 and stuff like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Perfect fit.
Did we lose Mike?
No, I was letting you guys talk. I was trying not to step on your conversation.
Well, I did have another question, and that's, I haven't looked at the Kickstarter, so I haven't seen, but like, what kind of support do we have already coming out for the game?
Well, you want me to sort of just run through some of the stretch goals, or?
I mean, if you don't mind, just the stuff that we already have coming, like if you got like a monster manual kind of coming out, or an adventure book.
So, obviously there's a core rule book, 192-page full color core rule book. And that is packed with everything from character generation rules to new edges, new hindrances, new powers. We've got arcane background stuff in there. We've got loads and loads of new gear and vehicles, rocket ships.
Is that the digest size like the rest of the Savage Worlds stuff?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the model that Savage Worlds is doing right now to kind of give it more of that comic booky feel. So that's our core book, and there are also adventures and a huge bestiary and all sorts of other goodies in that. But then we're also doing a 192-page Kingdoms of Mongo source book that covers several of the major kingdoms on Mongo. So you'll get background information and history. You'll get Flash's involvement with each one of the kingdoms summarized. You'll also get NPCs, new monsters, and all new Savage Tales in each one of those as well. So it's a jam-packed book. Really happy with that one. And then sort of if you look at, say, for example, our box set, which is definitely something people should check out. This is the $175 level. You get everything in that thing, and it's a beautiful, big box. So you get the books, you get some new poster maps, which were they are all custom for the Flash Gordon universe, including an underwater Corellia map. We've got a tree map from Arborea with tree walkways and ropes and all sorts of crazy stuff in that. We also have custom action decks, Flash Gordon playing cards, custom dice, custom bennies, the conviction token, the cliffhanger token. We've got our beautiful GM screen illustrated by Aaron Riley, which I'm sure you guys have seen all that artwork, and it's just an awesome image with the villains on one side and the heroes on the other side, and Mingo City in the middle.
Oh yeah, that's the main image at the top of your Kickstarter page.
Yeah, that's our trifold GM screen right there, and that'll also come with a 32-page adventure. So that's just sort of the core stuff. That's before we even get to what our stretch goals were. And then once we get into the crazy stretch goals, that's where we start to get, we're doing table tents, we're doing form-fillable character profiles.
All right, help me out here. What's a table tent?
Table tents are awesome because what they are is you can fill them out on your computer. It's basically a PDF. And when you print them out, they can fold over, and all the valuable information for the player is facing the player. They fold over, and all the important information for the other players and the GM are on the other side. So it literally is a little table tent, like normally you'd put, like for if you're having a wedding party or something. But it's large enough to keep all that information right in front of you. You don't have to have a character sheet laid out in front of you. A lot of people love them. I use them at conventions. They're exceptional for convention use.
So it's basically like a quick reference kind of thing.
Well,
yeah, but everything is on it.
Yeah, for some game systems, like you can make a character sheet fit on a 3x5 card, and
sure.
Savage Worlds is one of those. And so if you can put basically everything important on the back of this little table tent, there are no character sheets. Like everything you need is on that.
Yes, that's your whole character sheet on the back, and then, like I say, just the important information for the players, the other players, and the GM face them on the other side of the tent. And they even have I don't know if we're using the same design, but the table tents I tend to use have a little fold at the front where you can then drop your action card in there. So it's kind of a neat all-purpose device to represent your character on the table.
Yeah.
So that was unlocked pretty early. We also have like all the character archetypes. That's all the main guys are all statted up. So you can, if somebody just wants to grab a lion man or a shark man, then just go for it and customize it a little bit. They can do that, and those will all be available. We've got our miniatures, heroes, villains, nobles, a whole bunch of those that are coming out, and those have all been done by Bronze Age Miniatures. Did those for us.
So are these unpainted pewter?
Yeah, they're metal.
Oh.
Metal miniatures. Sorry. And let's see, we've got our map of Mongo. I'm just scrolling down here now.
Yeah.
Let's see, the cliffhanger cards. Originally, we were just going to offer them as a PDF, but at 65,000, as you said, we unlocked those as print versions, which will be really nice. We've got some bookmarks that just got unlocked, and those also have like extra rules and stuff on them. And I know whenever I'm gaming, I'm always like sticking little Post-its and stuff, and they have some of these cool looking custom bookmarks with art by Aaron Riley. I'll be using the heck out of those guys. And then figure flats are coming up soon at the 80,000 mark. And I don't know if you guys use figure flats at all, but gosh, I love them, especially if you need suddenly to have an army of Imperial soldiers or linemen running across your table. It's a lot easier to do it just by printing them out and cutting them and gluing them.
Yes. Are these like stand-ups, like the old cardboard heroes, or are they like...
They're the trifold style, yeah. So you just kind of fold them over, I think, on what, 3 lines or something like that, 2 lines, 3 lines, I guess, and then they just kind of glue in the back of a little tab.
I only used those for Savage Worlds games, though. I know I did Kickstarter several years ago, a game I wrote called Kaiser's Gate, and a lot of the backers were like, "Oh yeah, we want figure flats for that," so we, that's something we did. And I haven't really. It's a great thing. It seems like it's more popular in the Savage Worlds, part of the RPG world, but it's a cool thing.
And I love the other thing I really love about them is I often will just take a whole bunch of those things with me when I travel to a convention, because I would, rather than hauling metal or plastic minis in a big carry case or something, I can at least throw a small box or a bag of these guys and be all set.
Yeah, it's less hassle, I'm sure, with security too. Hey, speaking of Flash Gordon, actually, this is more of an homage, really, than a direct thing. But did you read Mark Millar's Starlight comic book from a few years back?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm writing it down right now.
Okay, it was basically Mark Millar's take on an older, you could call it old man Flash Gordon. It's like old man Logan. He's retired. His family, his wife is dead. His kids have kind of dispersed, and a kid shows up in a rocket one day and says, "Hey, everything's gone to shit back on Mungo. We need you." And 6-issue miniseries, basically following that kind of a plot line. So,
oh, that sounds awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, if you like Mark Millar, it's what are you saying, Jason?
I was just noting that that reminds me, that kind of gives me an idea of a way to use this Flash Gordon stuff. There's a long tradition in a lot of other kinds of books, like say, comics or whatever, that as a break from the regular story, the character gets sucked by transporter tube or whatever, and ends up on a alien planet for 6 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. Thinking of stories like Sword of the Atom, the old DC comic, or stories like even Adam Strange, would go off and have his adventures. It just seems to me like you could kind of take a lot of this stuff and you could use it in a different Savage Worlds game. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you were running, like, because Savage Worlds really supports World War II very well, and if your characters are adventuring in World War II, and then you put them you get them captured by Germans or whatever, and they're on their way out, and they find the rocket ship, and by next session you're in Mongo, and you can run a whole game there. And then they end up getting back home to the Western Front, and no one believes a word they say.
Right.
It would just be a really fun kind of break for a campaign. I would love to do that.
Well, it's funny, in the original strips, there is a period where Flash and company head back to Earth, and it just becomes a World War II story. But what's really interesting is Flash and Zarkov poured over Mongo technology, and they start coming up with new war machines and things like that. And I was hugely fascinated by that section of the strip, or the sort of era of the strip. Yeah. And so, of course, now I'm thinking, well, down the line, I really feel like we have to do an Earth source book, because I want to see how Mongo technology is changing the world, especially during World War II. So it's like, knock, knock, tell her you need to get on this. So I would love to do that. I mean, there's certainly other things that we can explore in the future. For example, there are 2 moons that are discussed. I think it's Eternia and, oh gosh, I can't remember the other one. One of them is supposed to be a prison moon, but those are never visited in the original strips. But I'm thinking, boy, wouldn't those be fun to do stuff with? Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of potential for new material. And I mean, even in the just the core universe, there's other corners of the map that haven't necessarily been explored as well as I'd like to do. And I really think that we could get away with doing a full Mingo City book too, because there's, it's the capital city. There's so much that goes on there. We certainly touch on it a lot, but I think there's a lot more potential in there. So we could definitely keep going with this.
Just on a similar angle, the World War II meets Flash Gordon stuff. I don't know if you guys read Ignition City by Warren Ellis. Again, came out, I want to say 5-10 years ago. It was kind of his dual homage to Deadwood and Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers at the same time. Alternate fictional history where World War II is interrupted by a Martian invasion. Except in this one, the Martians are basically a reskinned, Ming the Merciless. And, it's, he allies with Hitler. Mm-hmm. And it's Warren Ellis. They never really go into the backstory too much, but it's all told in occasional flashbacks because, it's
flashbacks. I see what you did.
I didn't even, it's a subconscious joke. But yeah, it's another one. It's another one of those. The space heroes are old and retired, kind of like Miller did with Starlight, and it's So anyway, you mentioned the mashing up of World War II and Flash Gordon.
I think that because it's such a nostalgic time period, it lends itself to those old heroes going back for one last fight kind of thing.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It reminds me of, and I'm going to date myself here, it reminds me of the Buck Rogers television show when Buster Crabbe showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a kind of, you know, last adventure of the aging hero, and also a nod to some of these favorite stories, you know.
Yeah, didn't he even do sort of little joking asides as to be like, you know, oh, I've been around the block before, you know, that kind of stuff, like, oh, I've done this before. And
yeah, I think that's one of those cameo where it's almost entirely made up of joking asides. Like well, when they had Adam West show up as the Grey Ghost on the Batman Animated Adventures, you know,
which was still a glorious episode.
Oh, it's a great show. Actually, the stars of Justice League Unlimited are running an online campaign right now trying to get people to pester WB into doing one last movie, or bring back the series or something. But yeah, you know, it was every scene that Adam West was in, he wasn't saying, "Wink, wink, kids, I used to be Batman," but you know, there was an awful lot of that kind of flavor to it.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of animation, you were talking about the whole World War II thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the Flash Gordon animated movie that predated the Filmation TV series. It's kind of hard to track down because I don't know if it was ever released, but there is a full version on YouTube that you can watch. And it was that movie that really sort of spawned the Filmation series. A lot of the same voice actors, a lot of the same character design, although they had a little bit more money. And in the beginning of
Flash Gordon, the greatest adventure of all.
The greatest adventure of all, yeah. In the very beginning of that, there's a whole sequence, and I think it gets revisited, where Ming is watching Hitler and making comments about, you know, this guy has potential. And it's just like, I mean, it's amazing stuff to see, because that film just really embraces World War II and that whole mythology and sort of combines things together. But there's battles on Earth, and it's pretty amazing. Like, if you ever want to sit down and watch a pretty special movie, that's one I recommend.
I think that's on Amazon Prime now, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it'd be fun to do like a weird World War II campaign that kind of, you know, mashed up with Flash Gordon. I could
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there are so many, as I said earlier, there's so many analogs to current events in the original strips. However, when Flash goes back to Earth during World War II, there's no Hitler. There's no mention of Hitler. There's another villain that's out there that's causing all sorts of trouble. So
when was this being published?
It was at the same time.
Because I wonder why. Was that because we hadn't entered the war yet? Was it like in 1940?
I'm going to flip in this book here and see if I can figure out exactly.
I know that happened a lot with superhero characters, where, you know, even though Captain America is punching Hitler on the cover of his first comic, for a couple of years there during the Superman Batman 38 to 40 era, the publishers of the comics told Siegel and Schuster and the other comics writers not to specifically have them fight Nazis. They had to create fake Nazis, like guys that looked like Nazis, and they had symbols like Nazis, but they weren't actually Nazis. So you can't use the swastika. You have to put some other symbol on their for example.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the same thing, although now I'm looking at the strip itself, and the first time they go back, it's June of 1941.
Well, so it's right around that same. That's like April is when the Captain America cover comes out.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's right around that same time period, and that was the really intense kind of the time in America when you had a bunch of people who had supported Hitler and Hitler's Germany before we understood quite what he was doing. You know, like you had people like Lindbergh and so on, who were on record as saying that Hitler's not that bad of a guy, and look how he's bringing Germany back from poverty. And then we kind of started to realize more about what he was doing with his, the purges of Poland and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The public perception turns, but there was that time period right there, like mid 41. There was a lot of pressure to not rock the boat. Like, don't make our newspaper political. So
right.
You have them fight in the war, but you have to invent new bad guys.
Yeah, and in January of 42 is when they go back to Mongo. So it's like,
so that's when the war happens, right? That's when we enter the war, and so that January of 1942. So yeah, that's like a month after Pearl Harbor.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure that's why they went back to Mongo. They probably intended to do a bunch more stuff on Earth. That's like, no, the Earth is too political. Let's go back to the Freeman.
Yeah, and there may have been, you know, sort of a psychological thing about that. Yeah, like you say, we want the comics now to be focusing on fantasy as opposed to Flash punching out Hitler. So,
well, you know, I think what you see, at least what you saw in comics at that time, is a tension between the comic creator and the publisher. The creators want to use comics as propaganda. You know, Jim Steranko, who I'm sure you know from comics. Yeah. Steranko wrote this huge book about the history of superhero comics in America, and he says Captain America is the character that gave superheroes a reason to exist. In other words, he was propaganda, and suddenly comics were not just fun; they had a purpose to manipulate the country in wartime. Right? Like that's what they were for. Well, anyway, so you see people like Siegel and Schuster who create Superman, who's very much like a, and please forgive me, Mike, I'm going off on this. I'm sorry. He was very much a kind of like FDR, you know, New Deal superhero. But the editors and publishers were like, you know, we don't want to do that stuff. We're worried about our bottom line. We don't want to do stuff that people aren't going to buy. And so they make him fight bank robbers, you know? And I think that, I don't know, I'm very interested now to look back at Raymond and look at the other creators. Look at the other creators behind Flash Gordon and wonder if there was a tension there between creators who wanted to talk about socially important issues and publishers who were like, we're here to sell comics. We're here to sell newspapers.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, shutting up now.
It's almost like you're a comic book academic, Jason.
I'm sorry. I am. And so I am.
And I suppose longtime listeners probably remember, although maybe new listeners, and Scott, you might not know it, Jason actually is an academic who focuses on the American comic books. So. Oh,
that's awesome. I mean, you may have some connection to my my co-author of Cinema and Sorcery, Arnold Blumberg. He teaches about comics and pop culture, and also about zombies and pop culture and all that kind of stuff at University of Baltimore.
I believe I know his name, but I don't think we've ever met. But I think
he's got a few things published in essays and books as well. But he and I co-wrote that book together because
that's awesome. Bloomberg.
Yeah. Small world.
The academic world is just, but you know, it's honestly, it's amazing how big it's getting, and it's not just about comics; it's about gaming too.
Yeah.
There's a huge push in academia to sort of gamify the university, not only in the sense of making going to school like a game, but also talking about games and game theory in the university classroom. Just to give an example, one of my colleagues did a grant. Got grant money to run. Basically, we would immediately identify it as a LARP in his American literature class, and he had all of his students playing parts from American literary history of the 1920s and 1930s. You know,
I call Gatsby.
Exactly. That's exactly it was. Yeah, except that they were playing Fitzgerald and Zelda instead of the characters that they wrote that they created. And I remember him coming to me and like asking me like, how do I do this? And suddenly all of my role-playing game experience came into the classroom. So it's not, it's going to only get closer. It's only going to get closer.
That's no bad thing.
No, it's good. And I think that, I mean, you know, Flash has a wonderful pedigree with Alex Raymond. I mean, he's a foundational character in the history of comics. So it's a great excuse to do that.
Hey, Jason, since you're an academic who focuses on comics, if you're to pick the archetype for Flash Gordon.
Since I am boring as shit.
No, I'm just going to say, I mean, if you're going to pick which historical archetype Flash best embodies, is he an echo of, you know, King Arthur?
Flash is the defining archetype of the astronaut hero.
Right? Okay, fair enough.
Many other examples like Buck Rogers and Adam Strange and many other characters, and they're Earthmen who travel to another society, and it's the opposite of the alien who comes to Earth. I mean, but they function many of the same roles. Like when an alien shows up on Earth, they ask like, why do you do these crazy things? Why do you wear clothes? Why do you eat the way you eat? You know, and they ask all these weird questions, and a lot of it is humor.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is designed to be social criticism, where they get us to ask ourselves about our own practices. Like, well, why do you insist on killing each other over property? You know, things like this. And when an astronaut goes, he's often an ambassador carrying Earth, by which I mean American, values to another country, to another planet, and kind of demonstrating good old American know-how. It's kind of like the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, if you want an Arthurian example.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Where the character goes there and he sort of shows how good old Yankee know-how is better than all your crazy alien zap guns, you know. And he's unusual because of his American and Earth upbringing.
Yeah, and the one thing about Flash Gordon, sorry to interrupt here, but the thing with Flash Gordon is you have a dictator, you have a tyrant in charge of this planet, and the catalyst to really get people off their butts to start fighting back is Flash, is this alien who comes in and fearlessly stands in the face of Ming.
It's a book about anti-fascism. I mean, it's right. I mean, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and the fact that it originates during that time period when fascism was, you know, sweeping the world, you know, not a coincidence. And I think it's especially relevant now. I mean, we're talking about punching Nazis, and I live in the South, and Charlottesville is not very far from me.
Mm-hmm.
This is a concern, and I think that having that conversation about fascism, we need Flash more than ever.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that Flash gets a lot of stuff done in the strips by punching people.
Of course he does.
or hurling. There's a very funny thing. As I was originally going through the strips, and I took copious notes when I was reading them. The number of times that Flash picks up an enemy and hurls him or her to their doom is shocking. And it always says hurl. It got to the point where when I was writing the game, I thought, we have to have a rule for hurling because they happen so often.
It should be like they're not called feats in what are they called? They're
edges and hindrances.
Yeah, the hurl to your doom edge.
I think I put it in there, but it may not have survived the edit.
Well, yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, like why? And see, it's different because like in a lot of movies, like a Disney film, for example, the bad guy has to die, but the hero can't kill him because that would be too cruel. Mm-hmm. So the villain has to like fall off the edge of the cliff in some sort of poetic justice, right? Sure. But that's not what happens here. Like Flash is still killing the guy. He just by throwing him off a cliff. He's
got a lot of Mongolian blood on his hands, I'll tell you. But yeah.
That's interesting. That is.
But he's our hero. He's our hero, man.
Well, that's that's the pulps. I mean, you know, there's a John Carter RPG coming out from Modiphius, isn't there?
There is indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Kickstarter already? Or is that
no? It's coming soon. I think they're going to do a Kickstarter if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's coming up. I thought it said 2018, so probably maybe in the new year.
Yeah, the Modiphius webpage says to sign up on their mailing list if you want information about helping Barsoon in December of 2017. So
right. And but Flash doesn't have any. He doesn't gain any superpowers by traveling to Mongo. He's just a good old-fashioned person.
They are able to. They do have slightly augmented abilities because of the gravity. The gravity is. I can't remember what it says, but at some point they throw out some goofy reference like, oh, it's like half of what Earth's is or a third of the Earth's gravity or I can't remember what it is.
Oh, he is strong.
So they're a little stronger and they can leap. We have some notes in there so they can leap further and stuff like that.
That enables the hurling, which is important.
Yeah, exactly. But they can't. What is the leaping that John Carter does? I always forget what that term is. Is it psych or I can't remember what the word was. But when he first arrives and he does it, you know, it's like
my sole exposure to John Carter was the Disney film, which I really liked, but which bombed terribly, unfortunately. So
no, it was really good. But,
I liked it, and I'm a longtime John Carter fan ever since high school.
Yeah, there were enemies of that film inside Disney from the outset.
Yes,
wasn't that John Lasseter, the Pixar guy? That was like his vanity movie.
It might have been.
Well, hey, we've gone far afield from the Flash Gordon Kickstarter. We're now discussing Disney and Pixar movie gossip. So it is about 4:30 Mountain Time. I need to go retrieve a small child from a daycare. Hopefully the right one this time. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Jason, always a pleasure. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Scott, if you need a freelancer, I would love to write for this game. I love Flash Gordon, and I would love to write something. So.
I will tell you what, the one thing that we're opening this to everybody is now we are publishing, the Savage Worlds Explorer magazine, which I think issue 5 will be rolling out shortly, and we are accepting submissions for that from the general public. So. I guarantee we're going to want to have some Flash Gordon content in there in the coming year. So yeah, definitely keep your eye on at peginc.com, and you can find out how to submit stuff.
Is Explorer a purely PDF thing? Is it printed?
No, we've done print as well. At Gen Con, we had the first 3 issues printed. I have them here. They're beautiful. They're full color magazines. They're fantastic, and they're just loaded with adventure content.
Cool. No, I love magazine support. I'm an old fan of all the way from back to the Dragon days.
Oh yeah, it's awesome to have this. And it was weird. It just kind of popped up, and they're just going for it. Matt Cutter is handling that. He's the chief editor on that project, and nice. I think I'm going to have a new 6th Gun Relics article coming up in the 6th issue, if I'm not mistaken. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, Mike. Drive safe. Go rescue your Flash.
Cool. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you next time, and make sure to check out the Flash Gordon Kickstarter as soon as you can, because it has 5 days left. So
we only have 72 hours to save the Earth.
Flash.
Okay, thanks. On that happy note, we will wrap up. Thanks, guys.